And welcome back, folks. For those of you who've started your cooking, good morning to you. I know lots of persons have started their lunch, but we're moving on to some serious matters on the program right now. And like I mentioned during the introduction, I think it's so easy when you hear of epidemics, you go into a state of panic, but I don't want to carry all the load myself and say, well, don't panic. But I have two gentlemen who will be giving us some more information on what you need to know. Sometimes we hear about these things and we don't even take the time to do research, to read up on it, to find out how to protect yourself and your family. But I have two gentlemen with me right now who essentially we're going to be targeting on two main viruses that have been sort of showing their ugly face right about now. And the first is dengue. And a lot of you know with dengue, of course, the main carrier of the virus is the Aedes aegypti mosquito. And with the H1N1 virus, now that's pretty much like a flu virus. And with that one, if you're not treated promptly, it can have serious repercussions. So with me in studio this morning, I have Dr. Bowen Louison, who is a local vet on island, and he's joined by Mr. Benjamin Worm. Mr. Worm is Andre, sorry. Andre Worm, I just rechristened you on the program, so my apologies, Mr. Worm. Mr. Andre Worm is here, and he is the Chief Environment Officer. Morning, gentlemen, and thank you for being here.
Pleasant good morning, and
thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, I think this is so crucial. It's really crucial. Because I'm sure you're probably getting phone calls from persons as well saying, what's going on? Do we have any cases here? What's happening? What we need to do? That sort of thing. And we're trying to tell people, do not panic. Just remain in control and gain as much information as you can. So at this point in time, I'm not exactly sure who's going to target what. But Mr. Louison, if I can start with you first.
Yes.
Would you be speaking on dengue, sir?
I'm less qualified to speak on dengue, so Mr. Worm would carry that load. I'd speak more about the H1N1 virus. Mm-hmm. But just a little context, because both myself and Mr. Worm, we're part of the International Health Regulation Committee on Grenada, and we also sit on the National Surveillance Committee. We sit on the response team on issues related to pandemics, epidemics, and outbreaks in general. And because we are under I like to say the One Health umbrella, we work very closely on issues. The environment, of course, is part of that continuum that where the disease problems are, forms the reservoir for most of those diseases. And myself sort of between the environment, the animals, and the human beings where most persons are affected by be it viruses, bacteria, fungi, whatever it is. So that is kind of context why I am sitting here playing that role. And of course, Mr. Worm may want to add to that.
Yes, well, we work very closely together, first of all, let me say this. And at this particular time, we continue to work in terms of our response to this particular incident, and the increased cases of respiratory illness in Grenada that we have observed. Just coming after week 33, 34, what is around maybe the September, the Ministry of Health recognized an increase in the number of persons coming down with respiratory illness. And of course that created some measure of alert, and then in recent time, the beginning of, late September, early October, we start getting this whole issue of H1N1 in St. Vincent. Then you hear in H1 in Barbados and Trinidad. So, of course, we need to heighten our awareness and response.
So when it comes to H1N1, I know essentially this virus is not new. It's been around for a while. But now that it's sort of hitting, closer to home, the more we think about it, what do persons need to know about this virus? And how can you differentiate? Is it a regular cold or is it something more serious? That kind of thing.
That is exactly the challenge. one, you're in the flu season, and there's a lot of viruses going around. And when you talk about H1N1, you have H1N1, you have H5N1, you have H7N9, H9N7, and so on and so forth. So you have a number of these different strains of the influenza A virus circulating.
Right.
And that is where the challenge is. Now, you would want to take a chance and say, well, okay, what I have is a common cold.
Yeah.
I'm not knowing that it's a lot more serious and, of course, could be fatal. So here is where the real challenge is, that we want persons to, to observe and take the information quite seriously. You did mention that H1N1 has been around. In fact, the epidemic broke out in 2009. So as a matter of fact, it's called the H1N1 2009 pandemic. Yes, pandemic. And we had a number of cases throughout Latin America, throughout the world, but Latin America, Mexico especially. I don't know if you remember, we had some students in Mexico at the time.
Yes.
And there was a lot of issues about whether they should come home,
That's
whether we
right.
should isolate them in Mexico or isolate them here.
Yes, I remember that.
And the risk involved in all of that. And outside of Mexico, we had a number of Caribbean countries that was also afflicted by that virus. We had a struggle also because it's called swine flu.
Right.
Everybody immediately come to the vet and ask, well, why are the swine causing so much illnesses in persons? And we had to make the distinction that, yes, there is the swine flu virus in swine, but this swine flu virus is a transmission from human to human, as one of those, you could say almost like a seasonal virus. So that is where the problem is. Persons, to make sure that you could do a differential diagnosis, you have to test and then indicate whether or not it's just a seasonal flu, whether or not it's H1N1, whether or not it's H5N1, and so on and so forth. So that continues to be a problem. Right. What we are attempting to do, myself as the warm part of the committee, is to alert persons, make them more aware of the what we call hygienic practices that hopefully will help cut back and so on. In addition to a number of the steps that are being taken at the level of the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture to a lesser extent, since it's not yet an animal disease per se, and persons in terms of cough etiquette, general hygiene, and so forth. We are in the process of heightening our awareness, and we want to look at some point, do some testing to ensure that it's not on Grenada, but we're in close proximity to countries that are affected. St. Vincent, for example, have had cases. Barbados have indicated they had 2 deaths. And there's some confusion about exactly what is happening in Trinidad. I think you're aware of it. But Trinidad has indicated that they have had confirmed cases too of the H1N1. It's a virus that has now passed the pandemic stage, the initial pandemic stage, and we're almost in what we call the post-pandemic stage, because it's no longer a novel virus, it's no longer a new virus. It's a virus that is established in the Caribbean, and it is circulating among our countries. So as a result of that, we have to be ever conscious and vigilant, looking out for outbreaks. So from time to time, you'll have outbreaks. What we are trying to do is to ensure that we're ahead of the curve, and to put things in place so that we don't have too much problems on our hands. I think persons are fully aware what happened with the H5N1, which is the bird flu, as it's locally known, and the panic that ensued, and what could happen if you have if you have a major outbreak, and how do you manage persons from place to place, how you manage workplaces. We even chat about how you manage the worried well, persons who are not affected, but think they're affected, and they also show up at the clinics. How do you handle that and put themselves at risk? So these are some of the issues.
Oh my goodness. So essentially you're saying that we need to practice what we've always been told to practice, you know? Don't cough into people's faces, wash your hands more aggressively, just round the clock. I remember my daughter coming home from school the other day, and she's like, "Mommy, Miss said we have to keep washing our hands, like we never wash our hands before because And I'm like, yes, well, just keep doing what you got to do and keep your
principally
immune system
because
strong
we're in that heightened awareness situation, and there are cases in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So persons should just observe these practices a little more stringently and put these things into place.
I think that's the real crux of the message. The fact that we have to just take the necessary measures that we would have taken with a common cold, as any other virus carried infection.
Yes.
And I would like to, sometimes at this stage, people want to panic, people want to go buy hand sanitizers and all this kind of stuff and so on. And I just say, let's keep it simple. Keep washing your hands with soap and water. That's the best.
I prefer that.
Cheap, effective, cost-effective way of dealing with the problem.
Absolutely.
Don't sneeze and cough in your hands and wipe it on your clothes.
Yeah.
Because it's still a droplet infection as ordinary common colds and so forth. I also want to admonish, sometimes people have the common cold, and you would have a piece of tissue in your bag or something, and that one piece of tissue, you keep blowing your nose in it for almost the whole day, which is another bad thing.
That is, you got to, or even a rag.
Right, you have a rag, and you would use this rag for the entire day. Sometimes even without washing it, some people may want to go 2 days, have the same rag in a purse or in something, which is bad.
Yeah, you just,
so you try to use a bit of tissue and discard it, and so on. Do not have a cloth or rag and keep sneezing and so on, because you can in turn reinfect yourself, although viruses, are intracellular parasites and so on, but sometimes they can, live a little bit longer on termites and other things.
What about shots? What about flu shots? Would you recommend getting a flu shot?
Yes, in fact, there are a different number of vaccines that you could use. You have what they call the monovalent, which really targets one virus or one strain, or trivalent, which also is available, that includes the H1N1 protection.
Right.
So persons could get that. You don't want persons to just get up and go and get it if there's no outbreaks in Grenada. But as you know, in North America, in these places, people take seasonal flu vaccines.
Right.
It helps protect you against the seasonal flu, and in the event that something else comes up, at least you have some initial protection.
Yeah.
Although, again, subject to correction, they have discovered, or they've been indicating that persons over 65, sometimes the vaccine has little or no effect. That's a seasonal flu vaccine. So then one has to be mindful of that, what your own conditions are, and whether or not you could manage the vaccine at this time.
Right.
Our role is to ensure that we have vaccines on hand to protect, in the first instance, persons who are most exposed, persons who have to deal with the sick and so on. And if there is belief that persons have initial symptoms and so, then they're evaluated and so that's the kind of thing. But not for the public to just go out and have vaccines. It's not a common practice here in Grenada.
Right.
It is in North America and so, but not here.
Right.
Because even the seasonal flu in North America is also deadly. Persons lose their life with that. So again, that's just the basic principle. I just wanted to mention, though, that we live in an environment, or in a global environment now, where we have all these new re-emergent diseases and emergent diseases. So we have a lot of novel virus around the place. And the reason why we try to advance this alert to the public is that we can't take any one virus simple, because you could have what we call the mixing of the genes and a mutation of the virus, and then you get into something more complicated. So we want persons to always have advanced knowledge, always prepare, always protect themselves because of the global environment in which we live. And it's as simple as that. We don't know what the next pandemic is going to be like. but we always just want to, sometimes people say it's an overkill and you just, going on and on about the viruses, but that is the nature of where we live.
Absolutely, absolutely. Viewers, I'm chatting with Dr. Bowen Louison, local vet on island, and also Mr. Andre Worm, Chief Environment Officer. We're targeting the issues, health issues of the H1N1 virus. And coming up after the break, we'll chat a little bit about dengue fever and what you need to know to protect yourself. We'll be right back.